I'm Paula Sands. John Deere announced yesterday that it's cutting 225 jobs in October at Harvester Works in East Moline.
A future where John Deere no longer leads American agriculture might have once sounded far-fetched. For more than a century, the company was a symbol of strength and innovation in farming. But in recent years, that image has started to change, and not gradually, suddenly. What was once a dependable giant is now caught in a storm of layoffs, factory closures, and rising frustration among the very communities it helped build. It all began around late 2023. At first, there were whispers, internal changes, a few management shifts, and some quiet restructuring. Industry insiders brushed it off as business as usual. But by mid-2024, it was clear something bigger was happening. Major job cuts followed, and the company began shutting down key facilities across the United States. These weren't small satellite buildings. They were critical hubs in places where entire towns depended on Deere for stable employment and economic activity. Suddenly, towns like Waterloo in Iowa and Moline in Illinois, once seen as pillars of agricultural manufacturing, were facing deep uncertainty. Entire factories were closed down, and within months, operations were being shifted to Mexico. By early 2025, even more domestic facilities were winding down, with core business functions moving overseas. This wasn't a slow transition. It was fast, direct, and deeply disruptive. People who lived near these factories felt the impact right away. The layoffs weren't just numbers on a financial statement. They were friends, family members, and neighbors. Many workers had been with the company for decades. When the announcements came, they had little time to prepare for what came next. In some towns, Deere had been the largest employer. When that went away, local economies collapsed with it. Estimates linked over $34 billion in losses to the broader effects of Deere's downsizing. That figure includes not just lost wages, but also the hit taken by dealerships, suppliers, and service networks that relied on the company's infrastructure. For many farmers, the realization hit hard during peak harvest seasons. Repairs became more difficult and expensive. Parts were harder to find. Delays in servicing equipment meant lost time, and in farming, time is everything. Deere's leadership claimed these decisions were part of a broader plan focused on automation and long-term growth. Outsourcing was, in their view, a step toward improving efficiency and global competitiveness. But that explanation didn't sit well with the people directly affected. Farmers who had trusted the brand for generations suddenly felt abandoned. The layoffs weren't just seen as economic decisions. They were viewed as a betrayal of a relationship that had lasted for decades. Internal documents that later surfaced showed Deere anticipated some backlash. But they underestimated how quickly local governments would respond. Tax incentives offered to keep jobs in place were quickly withdrawn. Municipalities that had worked hard to keep Deere rooted in their towns now found themselves with empty buildings and rising unemployment. These factory closures triggered a chain reaction. Housing markets took a hit as laid-off workers struggled with mortgage payments. With fewer people contributing property taxes, local schools faced budget cuts. Mental health clinics in affected areas reported a surge in stress-related cases. For many, the change was overwhelming. One former employee in East Moline said he had given 18 years of his life to the company, and now needed help just to manage daily expenses like groceries. Still, the response wasn't all despair. In some towns, local groups began to organize. With little corporate support, people turned to each other. Union halls were converted into food banks. Volunteers set up tool-sharing programs to help farmers keep equipment running. Former Deere workers offered free training sessions in skills like welding and computer programming. The sense of resilience was unmistakable. Even though the situation was difficult, the way these communities pulled together was remarkable. One Kansas town, once known for its production line, is now known for its community kitchen, feeding hundreds of households every week. The woman running it used to supervise the factory floor. Now, she says, she's just helping people survive. This grassroots response has even caught the attention of younger generations. Teenagers in places like Iowa have stepped up, launching mental health hotlines and raising funds for struggling families. What they're seeing at home is shaping a generation that's more active, more aware, and more willing to speak out. These aren't just future voters. They're already making change happen. While this community-level response is encouraging, it doesn't change the reality many farmers now face. The machinery that once formed the backbone of their work has become harder to maintain and more expensive to repair. Some are holding on to older models, unable to afford the latest tech. Others are looking to competitors, seeking more affordable or more accessible options. The breakdown in trust between John Deere and its base is hard to ignore. For years, the brand stood for American-made strength. That trust didn't erode slowly. It fractured all at once, especially when local jobs were moved overseas and support systems crumbled. In the eyes of many, Deere's decision to pursue cost-cutting and automation over community stability was the final straw. Farmers now speak less about the brand with pride and more with a sense of loss. One farmer in Iowa summed it up simply, saying, "They didn't just cut jobs, they cut the soul out of this land." That sentiment is echoed at farm shows, town hall meetings, and across online forums where discussions about switching brands are becoming more common. Meanwhile, smaller brands and newer companies are seeing an opportunity. Some are positioning themselves as farmer-first alternatives, offering transparent pricing, simpler machines, and more control over repairs. Others are directly targeting Deere's customer base, offering trade-in deals and financing options that look more appealing in uncertain times. Dealer networks that once acted as local ambassadors for John Deere are now caught in the middle. With corporate decisions being made far from the fields, many dealers are seeing a decline in visits. Some are branching out, offering products from multiple brands just to stay in business. The traditional loyalty that once tied entire regions to the green and yellow logo is no longer guaranteed. When John Deere began closing its doors in small towns across the United States, it left more than empty buildings and lost jobs. It created a vacuum. For decades, communities had relied on the company not just for employment, but for a sense of identity and purpose. As that foundation disappeared almost overnight, what followed was not only economic hardship, but a political and social reckoning that is still unfolding. As factories shut down and thousands of workers were laid off, state and federal lawmakers took notice. The effects weren't limited to a few locations. They were widespread and visible. Towns that had offered tax breaks and economic incentives to keep Deere plants running found themselves facing higher unemployment and lower tax revenue. The disappointment quickly turned into frustration, and that frustration made its way into the political arena. One response has been the push for new legislation like the American Workforce Retention Act. This bill proposes tying federal subsidies to job retention. In short, companies that receive taxpayer funding would be required to keep their operations and jobs in the United States. Though the bill hasn't passed yet, it's gained momentum in Congress, with support from both sides of the political aisle. Lawmakers have been vocal in their criticism of Deere, using it as a case study for what happens when corporate priorities diverge too far from public interest. Iowa and Illinois, states long seen as Deere strongholds, have also begun reviewing past tax agreements made with the company. Some lawmakers are considering pulling back those incentives altogether, essentially saying that if Deere no longer supports the communities that supported it, the relationship needs to be reevaluated. It's a significant shift in tone. For years, Deere had a reputation as a responsible corporate partner. Now, it finds itself at the center of a debate about what companies owe to the people who helped build their success. At the same time, audits have been launched to examine whether the company honored the promises it made when accepting federal subsidies in the past. These reviews are focused not just on job numbers, but on broader commitments, such as investing in domestic manufacturing and community development. As hearings continue and more internal documents are released, Deere's public image continues to erode. The political pressure isn't just coming from lawmakers. Local banks and credit unions in farming communities are also raising concerns. A leaked memo from one governor's office revealed that credit markets tied to agricultural equipment have been under stress since Deere's withdrawal. When factories closed and workers lost income, many farmers found themselves unable to keep up with financing agreements on their equipment. Defaults and late payments have risen, and lenders are calling on state governments to step in before the damage spreads further across rural economies. This blend of economic strain and political tension is unprecedented for a company that was once widely seen as untouchable. But while Deere faces growing criticism and scrutiny, Something else is happening on the ground, something the company may not have anticipated. In towns like Ottumwa, Iowa, and East Moline, Illinois, former Deere engineers and farmers are starting something new. These individuals, many of whom spent years working inside the system, are now stepping outside of it. They're forming independent agricultural technology startups aimed at building simpler, more affordable farming machines. These new companies share a common belief that farmers should have control over the tools they use. One of the biggest shifts they're promoting is open-source technology. Unlike Deere's equipment, which is often locked behind proprietary software, these new machines are designed to be customizable and repairable by the farmers themselves. That might sound like a small detail, but it's actually a massive change. For many farmers, being unable to fix their own tractors without going through a licensed dealer has been a long-standing frustration. These startups are trying to put that control back in the hands of the people who use the machines every day. Their designs are straightforward. The focus isn't on high-end automation or artificial intelligence, but on reliability, adaptability, and cost. The idea is to offer machines that can be upgraded and maintained without the need for expensive technicians or specialized software. It's an approach that feels more in line with the needs of everyday farmers, especially those running small to mid-sized operations. These startups aren't operating in isolation. They're receiving support from local farm co-ops, community investors, and even former Deere customers who want to see a different future take root. There's a sense that this isn't just about technology. It's about reclaiming the values that many feel have been lost in the race for corporate efficiency. One company gaining attention is Green Hatch Systems. Based in the Midwest, it's already preparing to launch its first series of tractors by the third quarter of 2025. These machines come with 3-year warranties and no service restrictions, allowing farmers to repair them as needed. It's a practical and symbolic response to the frustration many have felt with Deere's locked systems. Support for this movement is growing. Local communities that once relied on a single company are now looking inward, investing in their own people and ideas. Tool-sharing programs have evolved into co-owned workshops. Community centers are hosting training courses in mechanical engineering and welding. Even schools are updating their curriculums to include hands-on agricultural tech, preparing the next generation for a farming industry that's rapidly changing. There's also a cultural shift happening. For years, technology in agriculture has been framed as something that comes from the top down, from corporations, from labs, from distant headquarters. What these grassroots movements are showing is that innovation can also come from the field, from people who understand the land because they work it every day. Teenagers and young adults watching their parents struggle to adapt to Deere's new systems are stepping up in creative ways. In Iowa, high school students launched a mental health support hotline for families dealing with financial stress. Elsewhere, college students with coding skills are volunteering to help local farmers learn basic tech literacy, giving them the tools to stay competitive in a market that increasingly depends on digital know-how. This growing sense of community-led resilience has given rise to a broader question. What if the future of farming doesn't depend on a few massive companies? What if it depends on networks of small, independent businesses that understand and serve local needs? That question is being asked more often now, not just in farming forums, but in policy discussions, investment circles, and university research labs. The rebellion, as some have called it, isn't loud. It's quiet, practical, and focused on getting things done. It's built around cooperation, shared experience, and a desire for something more human than what the current system offers. Farmers are beginning to realize they have options and power. One of the biggest shifts happening right now is the growing preference for machinery that is simpler, more affordable, and repairable. The message from farmers is clear. They don't need overly complex machines with locked systems and high repair costs. They need equipment that works, can be maintained locally, and doesn't come with hidden restrictions. Companies like Kubota, CNH Industrial, and a range of newer manufacturers have picked up on this and are shaping their products to meet that demand. This shift is about more than convenience. For many farmers, it's about survival. Rising equipment prices, combined with the challenges of modern agriculture, have made it harder than ever to stay afloat. Locked repair systems and expensive upgrades have only made things worse. By moving away from these models, farmers are regaining a sense of control, not just over their machinery, but over their entire business. One growing trend is the rise of regional cooperatives. These are groups of farmers and small manufacturers pooling their resources to create and distribute the kind of equipment they actually need. Instead of relying on large corporations, they're building their own supply chains, tailored to the specific conditions of their land, their crops, and their seasons. In doing so, they're also keeping money within the local economy and strengthening ties between communities. Some of these cooperatives are even going a step further, getting involved in the design and production process. With the help of open-source technology and small-scale manufacturing tools like 3D printing and CNC machines, they're creating bespoke equipment, machines that are purpose-built for their region and farming methods. It's a return to a more personalized, hands-on approach to agriculture, one that values function over flash. Another key factor in this shift is trust. After years of feeling overlooked or misunderstood by larger companies, farmers are turning toward brands and businesses that value transparency. That means being clear about pricing, offering straightforward service plans, and allowing farmers to repair and modify their own equipment. These changes might seem small, but in an industry where margins are tight and reliability is everything, they make a huge difference. Dealerships are also evolving. Many former John Deere dealers, struggling with a decline in customer loyalty, are broadening their scope. Instead of focusing on a single brand, they're offering machines from multiple manufacturers. This multi-brand approach allows them to serve a wider range of farmers, offering choices that better suit each farm's unique needs. It's also a way for dealerships to regain some of the trust they lost during the height of Deere's decline. In the background, policymakers are starting to pay attention. With rural economies at risk and job losses mounting, there's growing interest at both the state and federal levels in supporting these emerging alternatives. Some lawmakers are discussing redirecting agricultural subsidies to favor smaller manufacturers and local cooperatives. Others are pushing for legislation that guarantees the right to repair, aiming to prevent future monopolies on agricultural technology. What's clear is that the future of farming won't look like the past. The days of one-brand dominance are coming to an end. In their place is a more fragmented but more resilient system, one that allows farmers to choose what works for them without being locked into a single corporate ecosystem. This isn't just about economic flexibility, it's about cultural change. For generations, the farming community has been shaped by a few major brands. The shift we're seeing now is giving rise to new values: self-reliance, local collaboration, and technological independence. Farmers are becoming not just customers, but co-creators. And with that shift comes a new kind of power. Of course, the question many are still asking is, can John Deere recover? Can it regain the trust it's lost and find a place in this new, more decentralized world? The answer isn't simple. For some, the damage is already done. The factory closures, the outsourcing, the automation push, it all added up to a break in a relationship that had lasted for generations. Rebuilding that kind of loyalty takes more than marketing. It takes real change. To have any chance of a comeback, Deere will need to do more than roll out new technology. It will need to invest again in American jobs, unlock its repair systems, and re-establish a direct connection with the farmers who once proudly wore the brand. That means more boots on the ground, more customer service, and more flexibility in how its equipment can be used and maintained. It also means recognizing that progress isn't just about innovation, it's about inclusion. The shift to high-tech farming might offer long-term benefits, but only if those benefits are accessible to everyone. Right now, many farmers feel left out of that future. If Deere can bridge that gap by making its technology affordable, adaptable, and responsive, it may have a path forward. But the clock is ticking. The longer the company waits to adapt, the more ground it loses to competitors who are already doing the work. Kubota, CNH, and even new startups are not only filling the void Deere left behind, they're reshaping expectations. In some regions, farmers are starting to associate these brands not just with better service, but with a better way of doing business. On social media, the conversation continues. Former employees, dealers, and farmers are using platforms like TikTok and YouTube to share their experiences. Many of these videos have gone viral. amplifying the message that the farming industry is undergoing a major change. For Deere, every news story of frustration or disappointment adds to the growing perception that the company has lost its way. And yet there's still a sense among some that Deere could make things right. The company still has resources, reach, and technical expertise. If used correctly, those assets could be redirected to support a more inclusive vision of agriculture, one that values local partnerships, repair rights, and community-based innovation. But it will take humility and a willingness to listen to the people who kept the brand alive for so long. The road ahead isn't easy. It's full of competing interests, rapid technological change, and political uncertainty. But for the first time in a long time, farmers have options. The industry is more open than it's been in decades, and that openness is creating space for new ideas, new players, and new ways of working. The big question now isn't just whether John Deere can recover, it's whether the farming world even needs it to. With so many alternatives gaining ground, and with trust fractured in so many places, the future of agriculture may lie not in a return to the past, but in moving forward with a wider, more diverse ecosystem. One that values independence, collaboration, and real practical solutions.